Okay, so Brilliant Fusion is gonna be at 3 soon, and I think that this card might actually be pretty good in Branded. The reason for that, there's a couple of reasons, but fundamentally it's a fusion summon card, right? That doesn't do anything other than fusion summon, so it works with the Branded Fusion lock, which means it could potentially have applications in Branded. So after thinking it through, I actually think that I found a few good uses for this card, and I want to show them to you guys so that you can maybe consider using this card in the future. I'm going to test it myself, of course. I always test new Branded ideas. And I do have some hope for this. I think it could actually be pretty good. So here's an example list about Brilliant Fusion. If you don't know what this card does, it fusion summons a Gem Knight monster from your extra deck by using monsters from your deck as material, and then it makes the monster 0 attack. It also has another effect, but this effect doesn't matter. Once per turn you can discard a spell and make the special summon monster gain attack. It doesn't really matter. You're not summoning monsters for their attack. You're summoning them for the effect. This does not negate the monster's effects. And the cards that are good to summon in Branded are the ones that are in our extra deck here. We have Seraphinite, which is a Gem Knight monster plus a light monster. And this card gives you a additional normal summon, completely generic. So the advantage here is that you get to Foolish Burial any light monster as the material for the Seraphinite. And then you also get an additional normal summon, not to mention the body of the Seraphinite, which can matter for Verte lines. It's also a fusion monster, so I guess it can matter for other things too, like Mirror Jade material, potentially. And the light monsters that you want to send in Branded Fusion with Brilliant Fusion are Lubellion, Cartesia, Sword Soul, Quam, not so much Quam, but like Lubellion especially, and the Sword Soul is pretty good. You can also play additional good light monsters like Snow. This card has been played in Branded before. In fact, this card was at the World Championship last year. Maybe not this year, but it is going to be there. It was there last year, right? So this card could be playable with Brilliant Fusion. It always was in the past, but Lubellion is an option. And then the main benefit of this is actually just the second normal summon, right? Getting a second normal summon makes Verte lines really, really easy. It also makes playing through like Imperm on Alaba a lot easier too, especially because you also get the body, right? The body of the Seraphinite. You go Brilliant Fusion, summon Seraphinite, and then you get to normal summon additionally, going to Verte, and you still have another normal summon at some point, right? So it's really good for playing through hand traps. In particular, going for Verte lines with Seraphinite is really enticing for me because whenever you can make a Verte line stronger, it's really attractive because there's a lot of impulse and Ash in the format right now. And there probably will be for the foreseeable future. This card is good. As long as there's a deck that can play this, it's going to play it, and it's going to be a problem for Branded. So in order to get around all of the Ashes and Impulse, Verte is a really good way of doing that, and Seraphinite makes that really easy, right? The biggest downside to Verte in Branded is that if you just force a Verte in every hand, a lot of hands make a very weak Verte, right? They'll just go for a vanilla Mirror Jade plus Albaz in the graveyard as the end board, and if you just have that, it's not very strong. But using Seraphinite, having an additional normal summon and a Foolish Burial of any light monster, you can easily work in some stronger end boards, right? Depending on what you have. So that's why this card is exciting for me. There is another card that you can summon with Brilliant Fusion, and that is actually this one, Gem Knight Lady Rose Diamond. This one requires a Gem Knight and a Fairy monster. And it says, once per turn, the first time a Gem Knight would be destroyed, it's not destroyed, and also during your turn, when your opponent activates a monster effect, you can banish a Gem Knight card from your graveyard, target a face-up card your opponent controls and destroys it. So this effect is not as relevant as it sounds. Note that it says during your turn. This is not a disruption. This is not something that you end on and then expect to use as a quick effect, because it's not. It's only during your turn where it is live. So maybe going second, this is useful, but going first, this doesn't really come up. The point of this is to Foolish Burial a light monster, right? You can go Foolish, you can go Brilliant Fusion, Foolish Tragedy, and your Gem Knight monster, which is this one. We'll get to this in a second. And obviously sending Tragedy for card effect is going to trigger, it's going to get to search for Aliber. This has not used your normal summon yet, so this is a 1-card branded combo. It gets you to search for Aliber, and it even goes a little bit harder than Aliber because you also get this body on the board, which you'll see can be useful, not just as a extra body for the sake of it, for potential follow-up, but also as material, right? We all know that a random fusion monster on the field, even though it's not light or dark, could still be useful. It can be Chimera material, it can be Mirror Jade material, and I'll show you a combo later on where we actually use that. But yeah, the idea is that you go Foolish for Tragedy and search Aliber. That's a 1-card combo in Branded that we did not previously have. It's an additional 3 starters, which is actually a very solid card when you think about it. The other thing about Brilliant Fusion that is also really effective is just that it baits Ash, right? Gem Knight is going to be its own deck, so even at 60 cards, I think if you start with Brilliant Fusion, you actually will bait a number of Ashes and even Impulses, just because it is a really powerful card. So this is another good card to bait Ash and keep your Branded Fusion safe. Not to mention, if it resolves, you actually have the option of playing around Impulse and Ash for the rest of the turn by going Seraphinite or Verte. I'm not sure if either of these, if both of these will see play. I'm not sure if either of them will see play really, but I'm gonna test both. I think that both of these have potential. This one doesn't really have a combo attached to it, the Seraphinite, but in Branded, as you know, it's not just about 1-card combos, right? Your whole hand is going to be engine most of the time, so there's definitely going to be hands where having this as a target for Brilliant Fusion comes up really, really nicely. And then this one being a 1-card combo is pretty obvious why this would be quite good. But then let's talk about this card, this Brilliant Rose. This is the Gem Knight card. You can see it has this effect here. This card is always treated as a Gem Knight card. And that is not an effect, that's some kind of condition. I don't really know why this exists in Yu-Gi-Oh! Maybe it's like to do with the naming convention in Japanese, I'm not sure. But this is a Gem Knight card in the deck, which is the most important thing, because you can send it with Brilliant Fusion. It's kind of like a Harpy Lady, it's just always treated as a Gem Knight. And the reason why we want to play this one is not because any of these effects are relevant. Trust me, we're not even going to read them. They're not relevant. They require additional Gem Knight or Melodious stuff in your deck, and we obviously don't play that. But what it is an effect monster. So if you happen to draw it, you can normal summon it and it contributes to a Verte. Whereas some of the classic Gem Knight Garnets are the actual Gem Knight Garnet, right? The card that Garnets are named after. Gem Knight Garnet itself, this is a vanilla, and the reason you would play this is just because it's 1900. If you normal summon it, it's big, right? Sometimes they would play Sapphire just because it's 2100 defense, or Tourmaline because it's a mix, a nice balance of good attack and defense. But you don't want to play these vanillas. It's not really relevant in 2025. There's no reason to care about the stats. In Branded specifically, you have other things to care about, like the fact that it's an effect monster for Verte. And also, this is the only light Gem Knight. Every other Gem Knight is an Earth. If you scroll through them, you will see that they are all Earth monsters. And that's bad for Branded just because you would rather have light and dark monsters. A light monster in the hand is fusible into Grand Granol with Cartesia. It's fusible with Branded in white into Albion. Coritus, Masquerade, if you're playing those, right? It's a bestial target. It's just better to have a light monster in Branded than a Earth monster. The other thing that would be relevant about a brick in Branded is whether or not it's a high spirits target, and I looked through all of the Gem Knights here, and unfortunately, none of them are high spirits targets. They're all either rocks, thunders, or aquas, or pyro, I guess, which is all of the wrong attributes, all of the wrong types for high spirits, right? Like we really don't need that type. We need pretty much any other type. Rock, thunder, aqua, these are not the right types. And this one is also a rock. There is no one that is a high spirits target, unless you want to play an additional like Brick in the extra deck. You can play like Rule Kalos and then make your Aqua Gem Knight a high spirits target, but I don't think that's worth it at all. You're already ramping up the extra deck tightness by playing Seraphinite or Lady Rose Diamond, or maybe both. So I definitely don't think you want to be playing an additional target just for high spirits. None of the Gem Knight monsters themselves are high spirits targets. If you look at this is 27, 24, this is 23. None of them actually are high spirits targets. This one, 20, the Aqua 24 is 26, 14. It's not real. This one is also a light, but this is not Gem Knight, so Crystal Rose doesn't count. Only Brilliant Rose really matches the most criteria here, so this is the one that we're gonna play. So other than that, ignore the deck list. Really, this is just an example deck list. I threw it together. I did think about some potential changes, but I have not given it too much thought. You could play like more Cartesia and Quam. You can see there is 2 of each here. This is sort of leaning on the fact that you get an additional normal summon with Seraphinite, so if you do happen to draw Brilliant Fusion, hard drawing things like Quam and Cartesia is like a hell of a lot better, because you can normal summon multiple of them, right? You can normal summon Alaba and Quam and then splash with Cartesia because of that second normal summon. Something else to point out about that second normal summon is how good it is going second. Something that comes up all the time going second is wanting to normal summon Albaz, but also wanting to normal summon something else, like Alaba, right? And it's kind of, they're kind of clashing a lot of the time. Well, this can somehow let you do both occasionally, right? Not that it's not going to resolve very often versus combo boards, but theoretically it is more forcing, right? Because you have that option of normal summoning twice. So yeah, it's pretty good, I think. I'm excited to test it. Let me show you some of the combos just to clarify what I mean. I'm sure you can imagine what I'm talking about. They're not super complicated. It's pretty basic branded stuff, but I'll show you some anyway. Okay, so here we have Brilliant Fusion plus a discard. This is the 1-card combo. You're going to go Brilliant Fusion, and you're going to summon the Lady Rose Diamond. And this requires the Fairy monster plus the Gem Knight monster. So what you're going to send from the deck is, of course, your Brilliant Rose. This is your Gem Knight card. And then the Tragedy. As long as this is in your deck, you can do this. And that's going to trigger the Tragedy, because it is sent for effect, and that's going to search the Alaba. The reason you summon this in defense position is because, remember, it does become 0 attack and defense, so make sure to put it in defense position. Then you're going to normal summon your Alaba. Alaba's going to trigger, and here you can go for a standard 1-card combo. We're going to make Albion with Rebellion and Albaz. We're going to use Albion, banish the Albaz, and in these situations, I like to banish the Tragedy. It's really up to you if you want to banish either Albion or Alaba or Tragedy. Both of them have their merits. This is follow-up. This is potential, if this stays on the board and then goes to the graveyard instead of being banished, this potentially has its graveyard effect, right, to make it harder for the opponent to kill you. I actually value this a little higher most of the time, especially versus something like Malice, so that's why I like doing it this way. And then you're going to go Rebellion, discard your vanilla discard, whatever it is, and then make Mirror Jade. You can then tribute the Albion, bring out Lubellion, which brings out Branded Lost, and then end phase you get to set the Albion. There's no Albaz in the graveyard here, so it is best to set Banishment. If you left the Tragedy in the graveyard, that would be another target for Banishment, but you also have the Albion as a target. So this is the end board. It's a standard 1-card combo. You can do more here. If you've seen my spreadsheet, you know that there is additional options for the Alaba 1-card combo. You can activate the Mirror Jade if you want to, and that gets access to Quam and stuff like that. But this is just a standard example of how Brilliant Fusion is a 1-card starter in Branded. The other thing that's really interesting about the 1-card combo for Brilliant Fusion though, and you may have noticed it in the previous combo, is that you don't need the discard at all. Unlike an Alibra 1-card combo, where you need to go through Lubellion, you actually don't need to do that with Brilliant Fusion. You can go Brilliant Fusion exactly the same as the other combo, sending the Tragedy to summon out your Lady Rose Diamond. Tragedy triggers, you search for Alibra, normal summon, search for Branded Fusion, activate the Branded Fusion, send Albaz and Lubellion, and that's going to summon out Albion. But now here, with the Albion, instead of going for Lubellion, you can actually banish the Albaz and the Lady Rose Diamond. Remember I talked about how the effect is not a disruption? This doesn't contribute to anything, really, on the opponent's turn. It's not even got attack points or defense points. So its value is actually not that good. It kind of doesn't do anything. So in order to preserve a card in hand and not discard something, you could actually banish the Lady Rose from the field and go straight into Mirror Jade, and that avoids having to discard a card for Lubellion. It does leave one Albaz banished, but you're playing 3 most of the time, so it's not really a problem to have one Albaz banished like this. And this just allows you to preserve a card in hand. So if there's nothing beneficial to discard for Lubellion, you can play it this way, and then just have an extra card, right? And then of course here you're going to go for the rest of the combo, which is the same as usual. Trigger the Albion in the end phase, and set the banishment. So quite a good option. It's a 1-card combo, literal 1-card combo, unlike Alibra, which usually discards a card. This is a literal 1-card combo. So it's good to keep that in mind as well. Okay, so this time we have an example of a hand that you might want to go for Seraphinite instead of the Lady Rose Diamond. We already have Alibra, so there's no reason to search for Alibra. Instead, what we're going to do is activate the Brilliant Fusion, and we're going to send our Gem Knight, and then we're going to send a Light Monster. We could send Lubellion, or we could send the Golden Sword Soul. In this case, I'm going to send the Golden Sword Soul, for reasons that I'll explain. I guess I'll explain it now. The idea behind the Golden Sword Soul is that I want to send both Lubellion and the Golden Sword Soul, but if my Branded Fusion gets ashed or impulsed, I can only send one, right? So I want the one, if I'm not going to be able to send both, I want to have access to the one that does the most, which is the Sword Soul, right? If Branded Fusion isn't resolving, the Lubellion does nothing. So at least this one can help because we have access to Cartesia. And that's going to summon, of course, Seraphinite. And then the way that this works with additional normal summons is that if you haven't normal summoned at all yet, you have 2 normal summons available. The first one that you use eats up the additional normal summon. So if we were to say normal summon 1 card, then our opponent removes this somehow, or we remove it ourselves, we still have our additional normal summon. That is how Master Duel uses additional normal summons. So what we could do here is additional normal summon of Cartesia, and now we can normal summon the Alibra. We're protected from Imperm because we summoned Cartesia first, just the same way that Deployment protects your Alibra from Imperm. That's gonna trigger, and that's gonna search for Branded Fusion. And now we have a really good combo. We have a Branded Fusion with a Cartesia. We're gonna send the Lubellion now, and the Albaz into Albion. Albion's gonna trigger. And here what we can do is banish the Albaz and the Seraphinite. We no longer need this. This is certainly not useful going into the next turn, like almost certainly. And it's not contributing anything on the board, so we can actually banish it to do what we did in the previous combo that I just showed, where you skip Lubellion in order to preserve good cards in the hand, right? We don't really want to discard Maxi, we don't really want to discard Thrust in case our opponent has like a Nibiru or something. So we're going to go straight into Mirror Jade. Then we can continue playing like normal, summoning Lubellion, bringing out Branded Lost. Now we can use the Cartesia. I'm going to fuse away the Alibra so that it gets into the graveyard for its graveyard effect. trigger Grand Granule and Branded Lost. And here we can do lots of different options. It depends exactly on what these cards are, depends exactly on the situation. We can grab something like Shrouded, and we can send something like Titaniclad, but you can really do a lot of different things here. I like this option of going Titaniclad and sending Sword with Shrouded. So we're going to get to draw a card, we draw something like another Brilliant Fusion. This doesn't really matter, it's completely irrelevant at this point, we're already comboing. And now what we can do with the Sword is add back an Albaz on the opponent's turn, and that's a good combo with the Golden Sword Soul, because what's going to happen is on the opponent's turn, at some point, maybe when we banish a monster with Mirror Jade, we trigger the Golden Sword Soul, and that's going to summon out our Cartesia. Whether this is in the hand or in the graveyard, doesn't matter, this summons from the hand and the graveyard. So we get to summon Cartesia, and that's going to be a lot stronger if we have Albaz in the hand, right? And then we can get that with the Branded Sword. So that's a pretty good combo in my opinion. In the end phase, we can use the Titaniclad. That's going to summon the Quam. The Quam here, I want to send a second Albaz, just for simplicity's sake, just so that we're not forced to resolve a Cartesia, put the Albaz in the graveyards, just so that we have access to this one already. And then we can get Albion effect as well to set something like Banishment or Branded in Red. Right, so it's a pretty good end board, and it was made slightly better by the fact that we had Seraphinite. Obviously this is a decent hand anyway, right, like Alabra is already combo, but Alabra plus Cartesia on its own definitely doesn't do this. Does not make this board. The Branded Fusion, the Brilliant Fusion I should say, actually helped setting up the stronger board here, and obviously it would have played pretty well through hand traps. Suppose that the opponent had an Imperm or a Veiler, they would not have a good place to use that at all. So it's pretty good, in my opinion. And then here is another example of a hand that might want to go Seraphinite, but this time we're going to go for Seraphinite as a means of playing around Ash and Impulse. So again, we have the Alibra, there's no reason to go for the one card combo, because we already have plays. What we can do is something like Brilliant Fusion to start with, and we can go for our Seraphinite, sending the Brilliant Rose, and then the card I'm going to send here in this exact situation is maybe... we can go for the Golden Sword Soul again, but Lubellion is more enticing this time just because we have access to Sarania, although I think I'm going to discard this for High Spirits, so let's go with the same logic as before and send... oh, the Golden Sword Soul's in our hand actually, so we might as well send the Lubellion. I have a Snow in the deck here, but this is just an option. This is not going to be in most branded decks. So we send the Light Monster here, it doesn't really matter what it is. Summoning out the Seraphinite. Now we can go for our additional normal summon of Alova. And let's say we see a response from the opponent, or maybe we just want to play around Ash to be safe anyway, because our end board can be pretty good anyway, right? If we go for a Verte line and our opponent doesn't have Ash or Imperm, or Ash or Impulse, this is still potentially a strong end board. So we can go and search for something like Branded Lost instead of Branded Fusion. Then we can go activate the Branded Fusion, and we can go High Spirits, reveal the Sarania and send it to the graveyard along with an Albion. If we're going for Verte, you never want to send Titaniclad because you can't summon in the end phase after Verte, so Albion is always the send in a situation like that. And now because we have an additional normal summon, we can get something like Quam or Cartesia, and we can then special summon it. Even though we've already normal summon it rather. Right? So we've already normal summoned, but we can normal summon again, which is pretty good. In this case, I think I'm going to go for Quam. Quam has a pretty good use here. We get to trigger Sarania. I am making up this live, by the way. I just put this hand together. I did not plan this out. So maybe it is a little suboptimal, and maybe I am taking a little while to think. But we can go for something like Retribution. And then we can use our real normal summon on the Quam. And here, what I'm going to send, I think, is Cartesia. And now this is where Seraphinite really makes itself useful. We get to link these two off for Verte, and that's going to trigger the Quam to revive Cartesia. At this point, your Cartesia actually protects your Verte somewhat, right? They're going to have to imperm this preemptively if they wanna prevent it with imperm. They also probably would have impermed Aliber in this case, but even so, if there's multiple hand traps, this is pretty strong, right? We're gonna get to have Cartesia and Verte. The way you could play this from this point on, I guess, depends exactly on what you want to do, but you could do something like Chainlink 1 Verte, Chainlink 2 Cartesia, sending away the Verte. That is an option. We could also just fuse away the Quam. We have the Golden Sword Soul here, so I think what I'm going to do is fuse away like this first. And we can go Grand Granol, trigger, and then also trigger Branded Lost. Branded Lost here can search for, let's say, Mercuria or Shrouded. Probably Shrouded in this case. And because we've already sent Albion, and Titanic Clad isn't very good if we're going for Verte, the card that we could send here may well be something like Garura to draw a card, or we could send, if we're worried about actually getting impermed on Verte, we could send a Rinbrum and then send Albaz with Shrouded here. That would set up some plays decently through imperm. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to send Garura, and I'm going to draw a card. I think that's what I would do in the real game if I was in this situation. And then we can draw another card. In this case, I think I want to send... We have a Retribution in the graveyard, so we could send something to pair it with here. And I do quite like that option. I think I'm going to send Branded in Red to the graveyard. I don't know why I added that to my hand. We want to put this on the bottom of the deck, draw another card. Okay, we drew the Gold Sock, sure. And then we want to banish, and we want to add the Retribution. This card that we drew actually kind of adds a little bit more to this. If we wanted to, we could banish the Mercuria, summon Kit, and actually go a little crazy. But let's say we drew something a little more useless, like maybe not Lubellion. Lubellion's pretty fine, right? But, like, you get the idea, right? A lot of draws here go pretty hard. Let's say we drew Droplets. That's pretty fine. And then we can just set, right? Or rather, instead of setting, before we set, actually, we would activate the Verte, and now we can have a little bit of imperm protection. So if they want to chain to imperm, we can go Branded in Red, and then dodge. We can fuse away the Verte. That is an option. And we don't actually mind getting rid of the Verte in this position, just because the Grand Granol is also material for Mirror Jade. So if they go imperm and we go Branded in Red, target Aliber and then make Coritus, for example, clearing the Verte, it'll resolve, but we can then fuse away the Grand Granol, which is completely fine. We don't mind getting rid of this. It's just as much of a vanilla on the field as Verte is. But we're not going to get impermed in this hypothetical, and we're going to summon out Mirror Jade, and we're going to send Albaz. So now look at this end board. We have Branded in Red, Branded Lost for Mercuria, Mirror Jade, Quam, Grand Granol, Albaz in the graveyard, Golden Sword Soul in the graveyard. And we haven't even gone to our end phase yet, in which case we're going to get Cartesia back to hand, and also Albion. Albion can set a second Retribution as an option. We can set Banishment most likely, because we already have Branded in Red. And that's pretty good, right? We can't revive the Albion because it's sent with High Spirits, but we do still have Aliber as a target. And the Quam and the Mirror Jade are also targets eventually, right? So yeah, this is a pretty good end board, and this played around Impulse and Ash pretty well. If their opponent did have Ash, they would probably Ash Albion in the end phase. They might Ash Branded Lost Search. They could also just Ash the Brilliant Fusion to begin with, in which case we resolve Aliber anyway. And if they had Impulse, they couldn't really do anything about it. They might use it on the Brilliant Fusion, and if they don't, if they're trying to hold for Branded Fusion, they would realize it's too late, and they would probably end up using it on on the Cartesia effect, I suppose, which wouldn't be very good, right? None of that would be very good. So this plays around hand traps quite nicely. This is just an example of how you might use Seraphinite as a means of playing around hand traps as well. So yeah, that'll do it for the combos. So yeah, that's my idea for some Brilliant Fusion combos. It is pretty simple. Overall, it's not the most complicated inclusion in the deck. It's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm going to be testing it. Hopefully it ends up being decent, and hopefully it's a buff to Branded that might actually stick. You know, we've talked about this before. There's been new cards like Light and Darkness Dragon, for example, which for a while was really good in Branded, but it ended up not sticking, right? We don't actually play this as a staple. This might end up being the same thing, but I am excited to try Brilliant Fusion Branded. I do think that in general, regardless of Brilliant Fusion, the future of Branded is looking more and more to me like it might be experimenting with different styles of play, kind of like how the Azamina build I had a couple of formats ago was a different style of Branded, where you're not actually locking yourself into fusions as often as normal Branded does. I think that might be the future, right? Just because power creep happens, right, and to keep up with the new decks, you might need to play a little differently. I do think that potential engines like this might be the future of Branded, but this might not be the one. You know, maybe it's Draco Tail in the future. I haven't read those cards. I don't know what they do. But I'm excited to test this one, so you can catch me playing this on stream at least, for sure. One other thing to note, but just before I end the video, is that, in case you're not aware, you're not allowed to draw the brick and use Brilliant Fusion. This card mandatory has to send from the deck. It doesn't send from the hand, unfortunately, so if you do draw the brick, this is, the Brilliant Fusion is dead. This is the classic downside to Brilliant Fusion. This is literally why we use the term Garnet, because drawing it is actually dead. It's not like one of these bad draws because it's not a starter or a hand trap, but technically the combo still works. It's not like that. It really is dead, right? It's not only a brick because it's not a starter or a hand trap. It also invalidates Brilliant Fusion. So even if you draw both, this card they're both bricks at that point, right? So you do offset that a little bit though, just because you have a giant deck in Branded. You have 60 cards. Even if you're playing 40 cards, or less than 60 cards I should say, you're probably not all the way down to 40. You know, Branded doesn't really play 40 anymore. So you do have a little bit of offset for this card being a brick. And one other thing technically that you do have that I cannot wait to do is Kit can put a Brilliant Rose from your hand back onto the bottom of the deck, and then activating Brilliant Fusion. That would be a crazy play. I can't wait to try that. I'm sure it'll come up eventually if I play enough games. But yeah, that's something I wanted to try. So that's just about everything. I think this is a little promising. It's not the best thing in the world, but it looks kind of nice. I'm gonna try it for Branded. So yeah, thanks for watching.